After watching some of the anime and manga that I talked about, and developing stronger arguments, I decided to make a follow-up to my greatest power system video to enhance my points. I recommend that you watch that one first, because I will try not to repeat the points. Also, I made a video talking about power escalation, and it had the important explanation of balance in powers. To get a clearer understanding of what I mean by balance, see that video. Starting with the rule of cool, a power system should be cool. Battle manga prioritize fights, and if those fights aren't entertaining, then the manga is doing something wrong. Coolness definitely assists in making the power system and the fights using it good. Tamakoma and black triggers are actually not overpowered. My definition of overpowered means that they are unbalanced and that the pros heavily outweigh the cons. World Trigger establishes that triggers that are created for a specific user are stronger than those that are created to be universal. Regular border triggers give the user a Treon body with 8 trigger slots. When using a black trigger, it creates its own Treon body, which means that the border body can't be used at the same time, meaning that they can only use one ability, while the border body can use up to 8. The two Tamakoma triggers with the noticeable power boost consume a lot of Treon, and have been shown that the users can only keep it up for a limited amount of time. The third one doesn't actually perform better than regular triggers, so it's balanced. Additionally, they gain the benefit of specializing towards the user, but lose the benefit of being able to be used by anyone else. While black triggers are definitely stronger than regular border triggers, like Chrollo's power, they have a difficult setup, but unlike his, their powers are limited and have a clear weakness. Fujin has 11 ribbons that can extend slashes, but once he's used up all of them, he has to recharge them, and his weapon is reduced to a regular sword. Yuma's trigger is a little more powerful, but most of its individual abilities are very similar to regular triggers. Bound is like a stronger grasshopper that can only be created one at a time. Shield is like a shield. Chain is like an advanced spider. Anchor is like a lead bullet without a shot. Bolt is like asteroid. Boost, Gate, and Echo are unique, and the trigger can also copy, multiply, and combine its attacks. The trigger as a whole also relies on replica, an outside source of help, to function well. Elector has the weakness of its attacks only touching Treon and being slow. Aragonon's blades move in a somewhat predictable pattern. Spiracea's portals take a lot of Treon, and its spikes can't pierce a rabbit's armor. Vorphoros has his Treon supply system as a weak spot that will defeat it if hit. Additionally, the users of black triggers need to be compatible with the creator's personality to even use it. All of these triggers have exposable weaknesses, which have been utilized in the story to great effect. I'll move on to Hunter x Hunter. I still agree with everything that I said about the basic abilities. They give characters a less creative playing field when any character can use the base abilities and their Hatsu. It eliminates potential creative situations like Haki and One Piece. Zetsu, Ren, In, Ko, Shu, and more could all have been characters' unique Hatsu. This is even proven by enhancers, as they basically use a spin-off of Ko. But this chance is squandered by allowing anyone to learn them. Border's basic triggers can be used by anyone, but only 8 out of several can be used at a time, allowing for unique combinations and making the fights more creative and interesting. For Chrollo's powers, they do have 4 steps to initially stealing the Nen ability as a con, but later, his ability becomes unbalanced. It initially has the huge pro of being able to copy an unlimited amount of abilities. Another con was that if the original user dies, he loses the ability, but then this con is turned into a pro, when it is said that if the Nen becomes stronger after death, he keeps that ability, and presumably the stronger version. He starts off with a con of needing to keep the book open on the page of the ability he's using, meaning that he can only use one at a time, and only one hand is free. With Double Face, he can bookmark an ability, allowing him to use the ability while the book is closed, now getting rid of the one hand drawback. It also gets rid of the one ability at a time drawback, because he can have the book open to another ability. This ability was not only his own ability, but it decreased the previous drawbacks without adding another. It is purely positive. Furthermore, he can have the effects of multiple abilities active at the same time despite not being on their page or bookmark. Examples are Order Stamp, Black Voice, Sun and Moon, Gallery Fake, and Convert Hands. This pro significantly reduces the weight of the 2 abilities at a time con. There is nothing hinting that there's a limit to the amount of effects from different abilities that he can have active at the same time. Yet another pro. Moving to the actual stolen abilities, Order Stamp allows him to give the stamped person an order. The cons are that it can only give a simple order and it cannot control corpses, so when the puppet is killed, the ability stops. The pro is that it can control over 200 people, and that it can control Nen copies of corpses, countering its second con. There is also the con of the commands needing to not go against the person's will. but this can also be countered by using words like break instead of kill. When you look at the pros versus the cons, it becomes clear that Chrollo is unbalanced. Next is Meruem. His problem isn't a result of the power system, so it isn't really relevant to the argument, but he is still written as an unbalanced character. I discussed my problems of his abilities along with the other Chimera ants in my analysis on the arc he appears in, if you are interested. Next is limits. In my Chimera ant video, I went into detail about how limits can be so unbalanced and Gon's limit power-up specifically. What I didn't cover was Kurapika's limit and other abilities, which are also unbalanced. The first problem is that his biggest con is basically non-existent. Kurapika cuts off his lifespan whenever he uses Emperor's Time, but these effects cannot be acknowledged by the viewer as we don't know his lifespan. They also don't play a role in his fights because so far, he has never actually suffered mid-battle because of this. He doesn't experience any drawbacks in the present, only the future. Therefore, his vow basically has no drawbacks that the opponent can take advantage of during battle. The only time his drawback will become relevant is if we actually see him die mid-battle due to overusing it. But even then, that doesn't make up for the technical lack of a drawback in all of his previous fights. For the pros, he can use all Nen types force and accuracy at 100%. Chain Jail has the pros of being unbreakable and shutting down the target's aura. The only limitation is that it can only be used on Phantom Troop members. The pros are overpowered, especially the absoluteness of his durability, and the con is barely an issue, especially for his character. Judgment Chain can only be used in Emperor's Time, but it is still broken. When it enters the target's heart, he can give them an order, and if broken, the target dies. He also has a minimum of 2 commands. The only cons are that he has to be in Emperor's Time, and he can presumably only use it one at a time. Once again, the pros heavily outweigh the cons. Next is Steel Chain. By piercing a target, he forces them into Zetsu and steals their ability. Additionally, the target's death doesn't make him lose their ability. So far, the only limitation that it has is that he has to stab the target. With Stealth Dolphin, Kurapika can use a stolen ability, which comes with a full breakdown of his rules. He can use it for himself or give it to another person, including non-Nen users, just by stabbing them. The Dolphin tells the person how to use the ability too. The ability is fueled with the Nen of the original users. The biggest con in this ability is that it can only be used once, and then it is returned to the original user. Having to be in Emperor's Time would be another weakness, if the lifespan drawback was actually relevant. My last criticism of Hunter x Hunter is the actual Hatsu. People will have you believe that Nen has the most creative powers in anime, but this is actually easily debatable. Like most power systems, Hunter x Hunter has some really cool powers, but it also has some really boring and simple ones as well. Killua, Kurapika, and Hisoka have very creative abilities that can be used in cool ways. Other power systems do as well. One Piece has Luffy's gears, Naruto has Kamui, Sage Mode, and Clone Jutsu. Jojo's has Crazy Diamond, Gold Experience, and Stone Ocean, and that's just to name a few. Nen also has some not so creative abilities as well. Silva, Zeno, Gon, Razor, and Uvogin all have basic abilities. As I said, most power systems have highs and lows. The most creative thing about Nen is the base abilities that are accessible to anyone, but other stories like Naruto and Jujutsu Kaisen have also implemented a concept like that, and arguably better, because the abilities aren't so broad that they could actually be a character's unique ability. Moving on to JoJo's, stands still have some very unbalanced abilities. The world can stop time, with the only drawback being that it is limited to 10 seconds. There is nothing like a cooldown, or limited amount of times per day. BIG was basically so invincible that it had to be thrown into the ocean. Made in Heaven accelerates time with no perceivable drawbacks, making it the worst offense. The lack of power development is also a hindrance. Other stories are allowed to keep the same protagonist for hundreds of chapters without the fights getting stale because of power development. Apart from being cool and enhancing the power system, JoJo's lack of power development means that the only way it can avoid the fights getting stale over a long period of time is by changing the main cast every part. If JoJo kept the same cast for hundreds of chapters, this flaw would become very noticeable. Araki seems to have noticed this when he temporarily added power development to Part 7. A system like triggers, however, can continuously keep fights fresh by experimenting with different trigger combinations, individual fighting styles, and team fighting styles. Lastly, FMA. The story basically restricts each character to one type of alchemy, which then forces the author to make them use the same attacks in every single fight. Of course, the author could just make more creative situations and tactics like World Trigger, but since she didn't, this flaw has to be held against the story. If Ed fought more, and, like with JoJo, if the story went on longer with the same cast, this flaw would have become very noticeable. The problem could have easily been fixed by allowing characters to use multiple types of alchemy and introducing more creative types. The Raildex universe has many creative scientific abilities, so FMA doesn't have the excuse of being restrained to science. Learning new types could have been used as power development, adding some coolant to the power system. In conclusion, Triggers is still the best power system because of its coolness, creativity, flexibility, longevity, and balance.